60% kill rate in episode 1? Oh, I told you, this show is knocking futz. Do you think it is? Were you surprised? You know, they gave out screeners well in advance for this show, but I don't believe that this leaked, which is so awesome. It's so great. You know, other franchises have real problems with leaks. You know, James Gunn, again, to his credit, has done a pretty good job stopping leaks, but then he has a new problem of overhyping episodes. But there's I've noticed for the most part, there's this special thing about the HBO Sunday night tradition that nobody, even scoopers, want to ruin, which I think is really great. You know, it's that communal experience. I think it's the 9 o'clock drop time. It's consistent. You know, nobody's like, when does the episode drop again? You know, Sunday, 9 o'clock, be there or get spoiled. And I hope this trended also, by the way. I hope it trended. Alien Earth ended up being such a colossal disappointment when it, we loved it. Critics loved it out of the gate, but we got to binge it. But fans, they just turned on the show immediately. Talk about a horror story. Noah Hawley's like, I want to wake up. Still no season 2 renewal announcement. I don't think it's going to happen. So, you never know how things are going to go down, for sure until they do. So I think that's one of the things I'm the most excited about with Welcome to Derry finally debuting. I really hope that this is, I hope you guys are liking it as much as I am. So, the opening for this is nuts, right? It lets you know that this show is going there. But I think that the ending is really special. It's bookended extremely well. And I think, again, it was designed to trend because it's just so nuts. But I thought Alien Earth was as well. Alien Earth's debut episodes did trend. It dropped 2 and they trended. So the calm before the storm in the movie theater, though, was a beautiful moment. When they had, there you could hear someone crying in the darkness, and then someone said, nobody's crying, because they're like, are you crying? Are you crying? But then the movie projector came on to reveal that everyone was crying. And I thought that was just so great. Because, they're trying to be all tough, but at the end of the day, they are still these cute little kids. Dead kids. Again, as I said, 60% kill rate. When Teddy, cute little Teddy, the casting on this show, with the kids in particular, I feel is incredible. When Teddy splattered up again, I couldn't believe it. When he was flailing around, I was like, that's some wonky VFX. To be honest with you, that was my first reaction. But then when he splattered up against the projectionist booth window, I was like, I think he might actually be dead. And that was truly terrifying. And I think that what's special about this show, even more so than the movies, was that it allows you to experience what it's like to be in a Pennywise hallucination, which are hallucinations until they're real. Isn't that interesting? Pennywise, of course, loves fear. It's delicious to him. It's an appetizer. He feeds off that as well. But I also think he does it to whittle your guard down, right? Because, you just so often are like, just let it pass. You just have to get through this vision and then it'll be okay. Until it's not, right? You're not even sure what's happening around you is real. And then there's that horrible moment where you're like, I think it might be real. So that's how Pennywise creates his opening, right? It's the, we're going to get, no, you're safe. You're going to, no, you're not. And that I thought was really neat that they were able to create that feeling. It's horrifying. Up until the very end of the episode, even when the credits rolled, I was like, maybe it's a fake out. Maybe it's just a dream for Lily. I kept thinking she was going to snap out of it. But it wasn't a dream for Georgie, and we'll see. Doesn't look like it's a dream for Matty, right? I mean, you never know for sure with Pennywise, right? Especially after he used Beverly for bait, but he didn't keep her down there for 4 months. So, wow. So yes, welcome back to Derry, where we've got clowns. Also, now a lot of turtles. The turtle references are brilliant. I can't wait to talk to you about that. And they're all right here in River City, all playing, of course, at the Capitol Theater, a key location in Derry and in the movies, particularly for Richie. Of course, it had eventually become an arcade years later, and that's where Richie, as an adult, found his totem for the ritual. By the way, I'll be breaking down this show every Sunday night, helping you to catch all the details from the movies to the books like the Stephen King lore and more. So be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell for notifications so you know as soon as my breakdowns go up. They'll be waiting for you when you finish the episodes. All right, so The Music Man. Who here has seen The Music Man? It's a pretty good movie. I particularly enjoyed seeing it on Broadway with Mr. Hugh Jackman. He was phenomenal in that. I like the score better than the story. But speaking of the story, it's a fantastic choice because it lines up really well with it and Pennywise, because Music Man is the story of a mysterious man who comes to town pretending to represent fun, right? And also to be a warning to help these kids, because the kids are going to get into trouble with a capital T. But in reality, sorry if I'm spoiling The Music Man for you, but it's important to why they picked that movie. He's a con man. He's actually preying on the kids, selling them band uniforms and musical instruments with no intention of helping them to then form a marching band. Again, as I said, he's a con man, and in the movie, his plan is to just skip town after he's made all the sales. Now, it's actually only an okay, the ending's actually kind of like in the middle. It's not like super happy. It's an interesting film. I think it's, it seems Pollyanna-like, but I think it captures an interesting time in cinema where it was moving a little bit more into realism, like where he's not going to have a total, redemption moment. So that's actually very interesting as well. And River City is great because there's a river that runs through Derry where you can float right on down to the sewers. So The Music Man also came out in 1962, which is one of the cycles of Pennywise, who emerges every 27 years. 1962 here on this show, 1989 in It Chapter 1, and 2016 in It Chapter 2. And the Muschietis have said that they hope to have additional seasons of this show, which will continue to go backward. So 27 years before 1962, etc. And that coincides with historic events in Derry. And that's all I'll say for right now. So how did they put Matty in the movie? That was the neat trick. At first I thought they just digitally inserted him. But it's actually an entirely new shot that's made to look, to be a cheat, to fit in, to splice in with the movie. And that's a pretty good cheat. They match the grain and the costumes just right. Although if you take a close look at the stand-in for Harold Hill, you can see that's a little bit off. Also, when you look at the townsfolk, the people around Matty are actually that creepy family from The Car. Those actors did a very good job. Very good. Very, very good. So the opening is also great. And, it's also at the movie theater. And there's this idyllic Americana up on screen, which again is an illusion because this guy's a con man. And even in the audience, this Americana is an illusion because you start to see the reality, people making out in the theater and stuff like that. Things that you wouldn't expect to see. Like, Walt Disney is very actually responsible for defining this era in American history. Even back to Walt Disney reached back and defined the Americana of his childhood, even though it wasn't really like that. So that's an interesting commentary just on society, right? What's, that juxtaposition of like the idealization sold to you and the reality of what actually is. So people are playing along. They're like, oh yeah, I'm part of the idealism, at least on the surface, which is what's going on with this family that picks up Matty. So yes, at first this family seems to be ideal, which is quite sad because that's what Matty has always longed for instead of the abusive father that he's running away from, right? So if only he'd had this family. So I think that helps get him in the car. So sad. The pacifier was an interesting choice, for such a big kid. It was very sad when he, again, he thought this horrible situation, this hallucination would pass. And that's why he just put his pacifier back in and closed his eyes. But it didn't pass. So that's really, wow. So the whole family, though, is a manifestation of Pennywise. The car, the whole thing, that's an incredible use of Pennywise's powers. I don't know if he's ever had anything that was that immersive before. That's amazing, right? And the way that this show quickly and quite imaginatively ramps up the ew factor, was so impressive. You know, the eye thing, you were like, oh, yeah, you know, like it's Pennywise. But the liver, because at first you're like, maybe she likes liver. People eat liver. But when she was putting her fingers in Matty's face, I was like, wow. And then the stuff that the mom was saying about the dot, I mean, you were like, what is happening here? And Matty, such a nice boy. Matty tried so hard to be polite, you know, until he you know, it was really sad. But then, of course, the piece de resistance of this sequence is the birth sequence, which, woo, you were right up in there. Don't hitchhike, kids. Like, wow, the Muschietis have said they were shocked that Warner Brothers didn't make them cut any of this stuff. HBO was like, let it rip, let's go for it. And I'm, again, very curious to see how it's received. This is one of the things that made me say that it's like The Boys for the horror genre. Like, wow. But I think it's well done. I don't think it's exploitive or, I think they earn it. I think it's earned. And that mutant baby that pops out. On the radio, when Matty first gets into the car, they're saying that the announcer says that they are fears of birth defects from radiation. And that's another great thing about this show. It's that, you know, Pennywise in his illusion is using not only fantastical fears, but very real fears from the 1960s. You know, he's mixing things up again. You're like, that's obviously fake, but that might be real, which makes me think maybe that might be real. You know, it's great. It's really well done. And speaking of actual fears from the 1960s, let's bring in turtles to this conversation. So yes, Pennywise's default form of choice is a clown because kids are both drawn to, but also afraid of clowns. And in the movie, there's a Lego turtle, which a lot of people made a big deal about because that's a reference to Maturin. Sometimes Stephen King gets a little crazy, so stick with me on this. So that's a cosmic entity that is the opposite of Pennywise, representing hope, compassion, love, etc. Because remember, Pennywise is a cosmic entity as well. He came from space, which is why all the references to aliens in the series is so smart. You know, the 1950s and 60s fascination with sci-fi, when people were really wondering if aliens might be real and among us. I mean, people still wonder that, but that's, you know, that was a kind of like a new thing people were thinking about at that time because it was the space age. And, you know, again, Pennywise is an alien. You know, these kids are like, maybe aliens are coming to Earth. And you're like, kid, they're already here. They've been here for centuries. And also there's a Creature in the Black Lagoon poster in Teddy's room as well. And, you know, Pennywise also lurks in a lagoon technically. So, I mean, I do worry, you know, like the Peter Pan metaphor was a problem in Alien Earth, but I think that here they're just kind of touching on it in clever ways. They're not leaning into anything quite as heavily. All right, so back to the original It novel and turtles. So in Stephen King's original story, the Losers Club do the ritual of Chud twice. They do it when they're kids, and during that ritual, Maturin contacts Bill and advises him. So there's already a connection there. And then when the Losers Club return again as adults, Pennywise tells them, Maturin's dead. He's not going to help you this time. And when they do the ritual of Chud again, Bill discovers that Pennywise was telling the truth. I mean, you can't trust Pennywise, but in this case, he was correct. So that's in the book. Now, in the recent movies, all they have is that Lego turtle reference. They've never brought Maturin into this new version of the story. But maybe Maturin might be showing up in the series, right? Because we have more time to tell the story. And we're certainly seeing a lot more turtles. They're everywhere. One of my favorite uses is the use of Bert the Turtle, which was a real-life animated character created by the government at the time to try and in a friendly, non-threatening way, teach kids about nuclear safety. But in reality, to lie to them, which is also very much in the theme of the It story. Because duck and cover ain't going to do squat if a nuclear bomb goes off. But still, Bert the Turtle presents himself as a protector. You know, he's not only on the sign outside the school, but they have that great mascot. I think that's great. I'm very curious if the turtle maybe will show up in the show. And then also, of course, there's the turtle charm on Lily's bracelet that Matty gave to her. Does that charm protect her? Is that why she's the only child in the theater? You know, Ronnie was up in the projectionist booth, But is that why, I mean, she ran in at the very end, but is that why Lily is the only one who doesn't get killed? Because she has that turtle charm. Oh, let's go buy stuff with turtles on it. You know, we could have quite the business in Derry selling turtle stuff. That to me is great. So yes, Bert the Turtle, real character, but used incredibly well here. You know, it ties into the Stephen King novel, and also one of the most horrific, you know, a real life fear up there on the level of what Pennywise can create, and that's nuclear war, which was people were the most afraid of it at this time in the 1960s. So on that note, let's now shift our focus to the top secret military project and Dick Hallorann from The Shining. So yes, Dick Hallorann. In Stephen King's original writings and in the subsequent adaptations of The Shining, Dick Hallorann is a cook, right? So most people know him from the Overlook Hotel, where he was the head chef. And then when the Torrance family shows up, Dick Hallorann recognizes that Danny has special abilities because he has the same ones, the shine. And he not only kind of like takes Danny under his wing, but he then helps to save Danny when Jack Torrance goes mad. But, you know, Stephen King gave him a history even before the Overlook Hotel, which involves Derry. So Dick Hallorann was with the military as a cook when he was much younger, but he also, when he was there, was a part of the Black Spot. He helped to found it. He worked there as a cook, and it was a nightclub set up for Black military members. And because it's Derry, it met a very bad fate. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, some people will know what happens at the Black Spot, but I don't want to ruin it. But just, it's very important to the story of Derry and also to Dick Hallorann. Now, this show has reimagined Dick Hallorann, I think for the better. He's no longer a cook, but instead he is, it hasn't been revealed just yet, but he does seem to be a member of this top secret military project, right? Very mysterious figure on the base. And one of the few Black servicemen there, which kind of creates an immediate bond between him and Leroy Hanlon, who has just been transferred here. Now, Leroy Hanlon is also a very important figure because he's the father of Will Hanlon, who's the father of Mike Hanlon, who is one of the kids in the Losers Club later on in the movies. Now, Will hasn't shown up on this show just yet. We'll be meeting him very soon. But we do know, remember, that he would ultimately, as an adult, be burned to death along with his wife, which would be a traumatic experience for young Mike, and Pennywise would use it to haunt him. And Mike would then go on to be raised by his grandparents, who are these two characters that we're meeting here. And again, this show is mixing very real fears with the supernatural. On this base, there's not just the threat of nuclear war and the Russians, like who wants the B-52 stats? Like, who is that? And there's no accent, right? But are they disguising the accent? What's going on? But then also, of course, racism from his own fellow soldiers. That's also, plays into this whole situation quite well. By the way, also, right before Leroy Hanlon was attacked, did you catch the headline of the newspaper that he was reading? The Paul Bunyan statue, Paul Bunyan, the mascot of Derry, but of course that statue would go on to come to life and attack Richie in It Chapter 2. Now, is this military project Project Arrowhead? There's a good chance that it is. That is a Stephen King deep cut because it's only been mentioned in a few of his writings and not the more popular ones. But it was a top secret military project that took place in Maine. And Stephen King never revealed what it was. It's just kind of like something that he planted that hasn't blossomed. And it sounds perfect, a perfect thing for this show to utilize. The Standpipe, key location in Derry for the Stephen King universe. It's brilliantly used here as a hangout for our de facto Losers Club. It's a large water tower. Doesn't look like a water tower to me, but I'm from the city where water towers look very different. But anyway, it's no longer open to the public, but these kids are able to sneak in. I'm not sure why, nobody sneaks into it in the later movies, even though it's such a cool building that's such a focal point. But here, they hang out there often, and it does afford a beautiful view of Derry. But it does show up in the movies, not only in the background, but of course, it's Ben's diorama for school. And it's on the postcard that he slips to Beverly as her secret admirer. And as I said, Stephen King has used it in his other writings as well. A very important location. So these kids, let's talk kids, all 12, all being bullied. Yet it seems that Matty had it the worst, as he was also being bullied by his own father. All right, so there's Lily Bainbridge. Bainbridge, by the way, is the name of a town in a Stephen King story. Not too much about it, but I wanted to point that out. Now, her father was killed in a horrible factory accident, with a rumor going around, a vicious rumor, that he got cut up and distributed in pickle jars. Remember that. Lily was so traumatized by his death that she got sent to Juniper Hill. Who sends kids to a mental institution? But I mean, this is a Stephen King story. And hey, years later, Henry Bowers, around the same age, would end up at Juniper Hill as well. This is the Stephen King mental institution. So it's a very important location. And it ends up being great motivation for these kids not to tell anyone about Pennywise, because Lily doesn't want to go back and the other kids don't want to get sent there in the first place. So, that's a good way, organically to make sure that, they don't just go and tell a responsible adult. Lily's friend Marge, though, she just wants to be popular again with the cool kids called the Patty Cakes. Patty is their leader. I think that's a great name. By the way, that fart joke in the girls' bathroom, I couldn't believe it when it happened, but it was just so perfect and so perfectly captures the tone of this show. Who do you think it was? I think it was the girl at the mirror. But that was just absolutely amazing. I mean, again, I can't believe that Warner Brothers and HBO let them keep it, but it's like perfectly captures this show. And Beverly, by the way, would also hide in the girls' bathroom. So these kids, in addition to all being losers, right? Something else that ties them together is that they all feel guilty about Matty, except Phil's poor little sister. She just was collateral damage. Lily feels guilty because she didn't feel the same way about Matty that he felt about her. And she is the first. I think that's a very intense feeling, right? She really regrets how that went down. And she's the first, therefore, to hear him and maybe even see him in her bathtub drain. So that means she feels guilty for 2 deaths, not only her father's, but now Matty's. Phil and Teddy, they feel guilty because they had to be bribed by Matty's mother to go to his birthday party with candy. And I'm not totally clear on it, but I watched the episode twice, but I think they forgot to even go. They took that candy and still didn't even show up. They should feel a little guilty about that. While Ronnie, she did help Matty, right? She helped him hide from the usher at the movie theater where he'd sneaked in without paying. But maybe she feels she could have done more for him, right? Like maybe she should, I think especially because she saw him right before he disappeared. Her father, the projectionist Hank, he even, he said, Matty has a really bad home life. Let's try and be sympathetic to him. Ronnie's a great fighter, by the way. Going to get that hammer, good for her. But when it comes to her dad, she has a real problem because the police are trying to pin Matty's disappearance on him because that was the last place he was seen. And as I said, very real fears of the 1960s, racism. So that's like she's maybe that's another reason she feels guilty. Maybe if she'd protected Matty, her father wouldn't be in the position that he is now. So Teddy is Jewish like Stan, right? And as they're both 12, they're both preparing for their bar mitzvahs. And the stuff about the line from the father about how the Jewish people know the real horrors of the world and don't need to waste their time with fantasies like comic books. I did appreciate the classic comic books that were spotlighted here. But that was a powerful line. And he tells Teddy about one specific horror of the Holocaust, the lampshades. Now, not only is that a true fact, but it's very interesting that they put it on the show because that's also being used over on the current season of Monster, because that was the details of what was done during the Holocaust was for its true story was inspiration for Ed Gein to do those things himself in Wisconsin. And so, I think that again ties in, real world horror, things that would seem fantastical becoming real. And then also Ed Gein was like just somebody who lured people like Pennywise to some degree. So that's again, that's mixing fantasy with real life horrors. So, pretty rich storytelling, right? I think that they are really using the Stephen King mythology well here. And maybe that'll save this show. A lot of people felt that Alien Earth went too far off in its own direction, but I think I believe it's firmly rooted in the Stephen King, again, mythology. So, and it has a lot of scares too. I think it really delivers on that front as well. And I think there's like 3 horrific sequences in this first episode alone. So that's really fantastic. What do you think of It, Welcome to Derry? Is it a worthy prequel to the recent movies? And is it worthy of the HBO Sunday night time slot? And how shocked were you by the ending of this episode? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today for those weekly breakdowns and more. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos, other new videos right now.